Hello and welcome to the OTB channel. Today's video is going to look at a small, independent and systemd-free distro that has stayed pretty much under the surface while it's been around. I've heard of it, but I've never tried it before. So I thought, well, give it a chance. Let's have a look at it and see what we think. So I'm going to do an exploration of the distro by installing it in VirtualBox and seeing what I think about it. Join me after the intro. Okay, welcome back. So today I'm going to look at Void Linux. But I say today, in actual fact, it's been a little bit different, this video, because I've been partially back to work. It's been spread over 3 days, the different sections. And that's part of the reason why I've departed from my quick look exploratory video. I have a way of putting a video together where I don't script it. I run a distro mainly for interest because I want to see what it does and what it looks like, etc., etc. And so I explore things along the way and share that with you guys. I turn the camera on and off we go. This distro, Void Linux, is not new. It was first created, I'm just looking over here, in 2008 by a former NetBSD developer, I believe. And so it's been around for a while now, but it seems to me that it stayed pretty much under the surface. I was aware of it as a distro, but that's about it. I knew nothing about it. But when I started to get a look at it, I spent far more time playing with it in a virtual machine than I would generally tend to do. Why is that? Was it because I just loved the way it looked? Nope, absolutely not. It's very minimal. It's like Arch in that respect. It's a really minimal distro that you build up yourself. I like that, but on its own, that's not a key selling point. Was it because the installation was something special? Nope, it's an ncurses old school installation. Very similar to Slackware. Was it because everything went really smoothly and, you know, I was just so impressed? Nope, not that either. My ride on this distro was not problem-free. I started off by downloading the Mate version, and after I'd installed that in VirtualBox, I could log into Mate, but that was about it. Nothing worked. Nothing from the menus worked. I couldn't even open a terminal. I'm going to put that down to VirtualBox, by the way. And I did have an error. I had an error message when I first logged in. And that error message continued until I'd actually found a solution. So the ride, if you like, was not all plain sailing. But there's something about this distro that I really like. So let me get my biases out the way to start off with. Of course, this channel is biased. It's my channel. There are certain things I like about a distro. I like when a distro is based, well, it's independent. So it's not a fork of a fork of a fork of a fork, etc. Which is why I like Arch. It is what it is. It's not based on anything else. It's why I like Debian. It is what it is. It's not based on anything else. Void Linux is exactly the same. So it has that going for it. Secondly, I've come to really dislike the customizations that are put in by developers. I understand why they're there. Many users love them. For me, I just want a vanilla install that I can get on and build up myself and put the packages on that I want to put on. So it's similar to Arch in that way. So, okay, it has that going for it. But Arch does all of that, so why am I so impressed with this distro? Do you know, sometimes you just can't put into words what it is you like about a particular thing. And I've come away so far looking at this distro, feeling that me and it just gel. Can't put it into words why, I just really like it. To the extent that I've actually, this morning, installed it on an SSD. And I'm going to build it up, and I'll take you through that at some point. It won't be today, but at some point. And I rarely do that. I really don't. So, Void Linux, I've told you a little bit about it. It's been around, as I said, since 2008. It was the child of a NetBSD developer. It is systemd free, but that's not the reason I find it interesting. Systemd for me isn't a big issue. I really don't care what the init system is. But if you're one of those people who does, and I understand the reasons why you may feel that way, it uses runit as its init system, so it frees itself up from that. It also allows you to either install binary packages, or it has a repository of source packages, which you can compile yourself using the package manager XBPS, which I have to tell you is really fast. So let's get on. Let's go to the website. We'll go to the split view and just look a little bit about what it's all about and what your download options are before I go on and install it and I take you through the process that I've been through. So you should see the web page now in front of you, and this is voidlinux.org. And we get a little summary of what it's all about. So it tells us it's a general purpose operating system based on the Linux kernel. Its package system allows us to quickly install, update and remove software. Okay, so far so good. And software is provided in binary packages or can be built directly from sources, which are provided again by the Void Linux repo with the help of the XBPS source packages collection. It's available for Intel, ARM and MIPS processors, so pretty good. And yeah, it's not a fork. It's independent. It's a rolling release, so download it once and just keep updating. It uses runit rather than systemd, and they use LibreSSL rather than OpenSSL. I'm not entirely sure of the reasons and everything behind this. They put it down to the Heartbleed fiasco. I'm going to read up on that, but nevertheless, I take it it's a good thing. It has its own package manager, XBPS, and I believe that the developer originally developed Void because he wanted to develop a package manager, and Void was the platform for doing that, or at least that's what I've read about. Now, over its history, it's not been problem-free. I believe that the founder actually left the project in 2018, and I wasn't completely sure what this meant as far as the distribution was concerned. So I got on Reddit this morning and asked a couple of questions, is it still in active development? And apparently it is. It's community run, and certainly updates are still coming down the line. The reason I asked the question more than anything else, though, was if I go to the downloads page, you'll see that basically the last ISOs that were produced were the 9th of November last year. And I queried this, but apparently there isn't a fixed schedule for releasing new ISOs Unlike Arch, who releases them regularly, is it once a month, something like that? It tends to be more like every 6 months or more for Void. So, okay, all good. And you have quite a range of options here. You've got downloads for 32-bit. You've got downloads for 64-bit. You've also got a range of things here to do with muscle. Now, I wasn't entirely sure what this was, but apparently it can replace glibc. So I did a little bit of searching on this, and apparently it's a new library, and there are all sorts of advantages to it, but it actually says here on the Void wiki, actually, that it's great for servers, but if you're using a desktop, you may be better just installing the standard glibc package. Because although Muscle is arguably the best and fastest, you may encounter issues with certain software that isn't yet available for Muscle-based systems. Most notably, a lack of proprietary software. Okay, well, I'll accept that. So what I decided to do, as you can see, I'm just there on the wiki. So what I decided to do initially was to go for the 64-bit Mate ISO here. And as I said earlier, it installed fine, but I had problems once it was installed. I just couldn't launch anything from the Mate interface. I am putting that down completely to VirtualBox. I tried the install twice, by the way, and there was no difference. So in the end, I thought, right, okay, just scrap that. Let's download something different. And I went for the XFCE ISO, which worked wonderfully. So, Void. It's old school. I'll give you prior warning, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for new users unless you really like a challenge. In the same way as I wouldn't necessarily recommend Arch for new users unless you like a challenge. But if you do like a challenge, and or you've got a relatively good level of experience with Linux, you may enjoy this. So let's kick it off with the install. Right, so you'll see VirtualBox in front of you, and you'll actually see two entries there for Void. The top one is what I've been playing with, and it's got an already configured Void system on it. But the second one is a brand new virtual machine ready for setting up. I've given it 8 gig of RAM, I've set up a 32 gig virtual drive, and I've attached it to the Void XFCE ISO. I'm told that Void is well known for not playing that nicely with VirtualBox, but to be honest, I haven't had that many problems. So let's boot and go through the process. We'll switch to full screen. Quite a nice little boot screen there. So all good. Remember, I'm on a virtual machine, so we're not likely to get the best performance. Nevertheless, I found it to be relatively snappy so far. And we're about to go into the XFCE desktop, and I'm expecting to see an error. And there the error is. XFCE policy kit agent. It doesn't tell us what the problem is, but I'm going to close. I have managed to solve that on the installed version that I've got, and I'll go through that with you later. But as you can see, this is a really minimal XFCE desktop. I've actually disabled sound here at the moment, so you're not seeing a sound icon on the panel. But you can see it's the standard XFCE with very, very minimal applications installed, which I don't actually have a problem with at all. So there's not a lot to see really on the live ISO, but what you won't see is an installer anywhere. because it has an ncurses installer that you have to activate manually. And you do that by first logging in as root, and the root password is void Linux. And there we go. And in order to activate the installer, it's void-installer. And here we go, we're into the installer. Let me just maximize that, and hopefully the screen sorts itself out. Okay, so reminds me at this stage a little bit like of Slackware, really. So let's click OK, and let's set our system keyboard. I'm just going to go all the way down here until I get to UK, and then we'll just follow along. This is old school Linux at its best. Right, there's US, there's UK. Okay, set up the network. Okay, well, I'm plugged in here on a virtual machine, so DHCP should work, and it's confirming that it has. Set the source installation. If you just want to download a very minimal system, you can do it over the network. But if you're going to install a desktop system, the recommendation is that you install packages locally from the ISO. So I'm going to stay with that. Set the system host name. Let's call it OTB void. Set the system locale. It's scanning for locales now. And let's find the one starting with EN. And there we go. Great Britain. Set the time zone. Oh. There we go. And I'm looking for London. Set a root password. And set up a user account. So what's my primary name? It's going to be OTB. And what's the username? It's going to be OTB again. And I need to set a password twice. Right, select group membership. Well, we've got some things here by default, so we're already going to be a member of the wheel group, the floppy group, the audio group, the video group, the optical group, the CD-ROM group. For the time being, I'm tempted to just leave this exactly as is. Let's just click OK and leave that. Bootloader, which is going to be Grub. I want to install it to the master boot record of dev SDA. I've just gone for a BIOS install here rather than a UEFI install. As this is all new to me, the Void system, I thought start simple and work up from there. Use a graphical terminal for the bootloader? Yep, okay. Right, now we get to the partition disks section. We only have one hard drive here. It's a virtual hard drive and it's a raw hard drive. So follow along and it will execute cfdisk. That's good for me. I'm going to set a DOS partition table. I'm going to create one new partition to take up the whole of the drive. I'm not going to bother with swap. I'm going to make it primary. I'm going to set its type as Linux. And I'm also going to make it bootable. And let's just write that. And you have to type yes here rather than just Y. And then I'm going to quit. So yes, it's not automatic, but it is really simple. Right, so the next section is file systems, configure and mount points. Right, okay, well, what do we want? Let's do ext4 and specify the mount point. Well, that's just going to be root. Okay. Do you want to create the new file system on dev SDA? Yes, I do, please. Right, so I don't need to change that. That's already done. So start installation with save settings. So I'll start this and we'll come back in a second. You'll see I did this on Friday, so I've done this video in 2 parts. The time, according to this clock, it's an hour behind the actual time. It says 2:14. So let's see how long it takes. So that's a bit of a wow there. 14:14. I started the installation and 3 minutes later it's complete. Wow. Do I want to reboot the system? Let's go for yes. And see what happens. So I'm expecting the grub screen, and so that I don't boot into the ISO, I'm going to boot from the hard drive. And see what happens, and hopefully everything works out for us. It seems to be booting fine. And here I am, I'm at what looks to me like light DM. So let me just put in my password. And there we have our XFCE desktop with this Polkit agent error. Okay, so let's fix that before we go any further. Now, at this stage, I've got an error. I've got the system installed, but I don't really know where to go. So I did lots of Google searches about what could be causing that XFCE Polkit error, and I came up with a number of potential answers. But I didn't know what to do as far as managing the system was concerned. So I thought, right, well, let's go to the Void Linux web page. Let's open up their documentation and see what it has to say, firstly, about updating the system before we go any further. So I'll just open up Firefox here because I've already bookmarked all the relevant pages I need. And the documentation page, or pages for Void Linux, are pretty good. It's just that they're scattered all over the place and you have to go from section to section to section. Nevertheless, what I did manage to do was immediately find a command to update the system. xbps install -su. So, okay, all good. I did that. The system updated. It brought down a load of packages and I rebooted and everything seemed to go well. I then checked what was on the system and it didn't even have Vim installed or Nano or any basics. I actually have those installed now, and I've also installed the Chromium web browser, but initially not even a basic editor, and even XR&R didn't seem to be installed. Now, the way that you install packages with this XBPS system is pretty much the same as you do with apt. So let me just open a terminal and go to SU. You could use sudo as well. Sudo is enabled. And to install the package, it's simply xbps install -s, and let's install AR&R. Do you want to continue? Yes, I do, please. Job done. So AR&R should be somewhere now in here, if I can find it. It might not have updated that straight away, but AR&R. Yeah, there you go. We've got AR&R. So it's now installed. I found it quite difficult to work my way through this documentation page, though, even though it has sections on just about everything. The pages that I found the most useful were actually on the wiki, which is a separate set of documents altogether. Unfortunately, there's a big notice on the top of the wiki saying it's now deprecated, which is a real shame. Nevertheless, this was where I found how to solve the problem for that error. And it was simply to install a package called Elogind, which is a login manager, apparently for Void Linux. So I copied and pasted this into the terminal and installed it. I then enabled the service by creating a symbolic link in var/service, and that was it. Everything else went away. So brilliant. The wiki was also really good because it told me all about how I use this XBPS. So XBPS-install-s, followed by the package name or multiple package names. So it's just like an apt install or a pacman-s install. You can search for packages with the XBPS query command. You can remove a package with the XBPS-remove package. You can synchronize your databases and update your system to the most recent packages by doing XBPS-install-su. Ultimately, it's nice and simple. So the wiki was really useful for that, even though right at the top of the wiki it tells you it's deprecated and no longer being maintained, and to go and have a look at the Void Linux official documentation services. Well, okay, fine. I just didn't find it to be that useful. Or rather, I found the wiki to be a lot more useful. I also found with the wiki, it had a section on a graphical front end. Here we are. To this XBPS package manage system. And it's called Octo XBPS. And let me show you it. I installed it, and it's a little bit like PMAC. And you simply search for a package here. What could I search for? Let's search for Thunderbird, for instance. And there we have Thunderbird. And in order to install it, I just right-click and hit install. I then click the tick, answer yes. It prompts me for my password, and it gets on and it does the install. Now, just like with PMAC, I would probably stick to installing packages on the command line and use this as a search function, a graphical search function. There we are. It's all done, and presumably I now have Thunderbird. Yes, I do. I can see it. So, okay, in terms of installing packages, we have XBPS, and it's pretty similar to apt. Obviously, you're not going to have quite as many packages in the repositories. Nevertheless, even having said that, there seems to be a fair amount in here. As far as the repositories themselves are concerned, in fact, let me just go back up on this page. One thing I also wasn't aware of was that there is an official repository, but below the official repositories, there are a range of sub-repositories. The debug repository, the non-free, and the multi-lib repositories. None of these were actually enabled. I wasn't aware of that until I got to the wiki, so I followed along and I installed each one, and I just made sure they were enabled. So all good. I've got my repositories enabled. I know how to use XBPS. It's all sort of working. The only other thing is, how do all the services work? If you're used to something like systemd, it's a lot different. And here, actually, the official documentation is pretty good. You start and stop a service with a simple command, SV. SV up, SV down, SV restart, or SV status. So just like using systemctl really. You enable services by creating a symlink to the service and putting it into the var service directory. So all good. And if you follow along, and I would say use the official documentation, but also use the wiki as well, because the wiki has some really interesting information here. And although it's not being updated, there's quite a lot here that starts to give you a feel for the system. So I started playing with it. I'm not going to do anything more with this install system that I've just done, but let me take you to the system that I configured yesterday, and you'll see what I've done so far. Okay, so here we go. This is what Void looks like, or my Void looks like, after about an hour. And I have to say, I'm really pleasantly impressed with the system. XBPS, the package manager, is really fast. It really is fast. The repositories also, so far anyway, seem to have most of the packages that I use in them already. But yeah, so I've played with it, and I've installed a few other bits and pieces. So I've installed PyCom, an archive manager. I've installed Genie. What else? The GIMP, Chromium you already knew about. I've installed some dmenu applications such as Network Manager dmenu. I've installed OBS, Shotcut, VLC, the whole of the LibreOffice suite, and my preferred terminal, Alacrity, and also HTOP. Let's go to HTOP and see how it actually works. It's currently on XFCE running at 351 megs on a virtual machine. That's pretty good by anybody's standards. Bottom line is I've ended up with a system that I'm really liking the look of. So what did I do first? Well, I did a git clone of my repo because I thought, okay, I've installed XFCE. What about a window manager? And I thought, let's put Spectre WM on it. And here we have Spectre WM. The Alacrity terminal. I can't seem to get transparency going at the moment, but I think that's something to do with VirtualBox. I have got PyCom installed, but I haven't installed the guest editions on this this distro, this VM, so it's probably something to do with that. All my key bindings and everything are as is, simply because I've used my configuration files. I've lost a few of the pretties up on the bar because I'm going to have to reconfigure them. But broadly speaking, everything's working as it was. So I bring up a terminal, dead quick. I want to install bring up Chromium, all good. I want to bring up Genie, all good. Everything pretty much works. I've got Rofi working. This has taken about an hour. I have to say that I'm so impressed at this result that I'm going to install this on hardware. So let's go and have a chat. Okay. I really like this distro, and the problem I'm having is I don't quite know how to put the reasons why I like this distro into words. I've just felt at the end of 3 days that me and it are really starting to gel. Yes, I like the fact it's minimal. That's great. I like the package manager. It's really fast. But on paper, some of the things that I found would seem to outweigh that. The problems I had with the Mate installation, put that down to VirtualBox. The error that came up. The documentation issue. which just doesn't feel coherent. Unlike Arch, it's scattered all over the place. It feels like a work in progress. For me, though, that doesn't really matter because you still can find the answers out there. And I'm just feeling really comfortable with this distro. Clearly, if you don't like Systemd, it's going to be a distro that's definitely one of the options for you. I know there's others, Systemd systems out there, such as Debian, but they feel to me like the only reason they exist is because people don't like Systemd and Debian, whereas this never had Systemd. It is what it is, a little bit like Slackware. It is what it is. Will it ever become one of the big names? No, it's not going to become one of the big names. This is a hobbyist's distro, and it's one of those distros that tinkerers will love, and the rest of the world will sit back and say, why on earth would you do that? With many other distros out there, you just have to fire them up, click next, 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 and you can get into working. And I don't deny any of that. I really don't. But if you're a hobbyist, you also like to get down and dirty sometimes with a distro. And there's that sense of satisfaction when you get it working. Okay, so you get the impression I love this. To the extent that I've actually installed it on my main workstation, not on a laptop, on my main workstation. And I want to spend more time with it to come to a more considered viewpoint. So what do you think? Have you ever tried it? What are your general impressions? I'd be interested to know what other people think, because it's been so much under the surface that whilst I've been aware of it, I can't even remember reading a review of it. So it's quite interesting in that respect. And of course, in terms of Distro Watch, which is the ratings don't really matter, but I don't think it's anywhere on that chart. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. Something a little bit different, something to play with if you're interested. Almost like a halfway step, I suppose, between Linux and BSD. Has a quite BSD-ish feel about it. But we'll see. Guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoy the weekend. Come and join me on Library. Come and join us on the Facebook group. And have a great Saturday. Thanks for your time.